All right, so it looks like we are live. I'm going to give people a few seconds and I'm going to look on LinkedIn to see if we are going live to make sure that we are good to go. If you are watching live, feel free to comment. And I'm trying to see if the live is showing up yet. But we are here today to talk about the Military Thriving Change Forum that we all got to participate in, that we were really excited about. I am Tab Bartley. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I work for the Department of Agriculture now. And I have Jen and Liz here with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty and talk about the event. Liz, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Liz Hartman, and I am a veteran advocate first and foremost. Excited to be here with you two today. Jen, it's all you.
Hey everybody, Jen Ross. I am an Air Force veteran, but these amazing Marines let me hang out with them.
We love you.
I'm the program director for Veterans Upward Bound over at Catholic University here in Washington, D.C.
Tab, what are you doing? Are you like beating?
I feel like I'm in.
Trying to make sure I could see stuff, but it's not working for me. So yeah, if you guys are
on our side.
Oh, well, I don't know what that was. I was just trying to scroll my phone. I didn't know I was making noise. Apologies on that.
No worries.
I was going to start dancing.
Yeah. Well, if you guys are watching, please feel free to comment so we can see if we can see the comments. The hope is that you guys, ask questions and we can interact with them. But if not, we're gonna have a discussion on kind of like our perception, how we enjoyed the forum. And I think overall the consensus is that we really enjoyed the day.
Oh, resounding success for sure.
I think without hesitation. And I think one of the things I was most surprised about was the no breaks and how much I liked that.
Oh, because in thought, you think you're going to hate it. You think you're going to want breaks, but then it ended up being so nice because you still got the breaks. You just got them whenever you needed them.
And I think it felt less pressured too that way, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and as a lady, I think we all know how terrible the lines are. In 10 minutes, you have 10, there's 20 people in line, and then you have 10 minutes of the next speaker anyway, because everybody's released at the same time. So yeah, mad props.
I didn't think about that aspect, but that is another benefit of how they set it up. It was great.
Yeah. And I guess we should kind of give an introduction, and Liz, I'll let you take more about this because again, I've heard about it at I think the tail end of it. And initially all I saw was military, change forum, what private sector, I don't even know what the marketing was, but it was great. And it was I want to go to this. How do you go to this? So can you tell us kind of what the purpose or the goal of the event was?
Absolutely. So the Zero Mills Military Thriving Summit was to really change the narrative, which is why I'm glad Tab's on here because we are sort of like counterparts in talking about, veterans thriving versus the struggles that veterans face. Zero Mills identified a problem across America where when civilians think about veterans, they tend to always think they're broken. And so Zero Mills wanted to really flip that on its head and get people to see, oh, you were in the military? I need to hire you. I can't survive without you. And that was the whole concept. So what they did that's the concept. I'm getting ahead of myself. I hope that answered that.
No, that is great. And I know that Jen, you were seeing the content because you about the pre and the event happening, and you messaged me and it's how are you going? I was I don't know. I just asked Liz if I could how do I get there?
I had a link shared around. Don't know if I'm allowed to give you the password, but take it and come.
No, I felt a little bit oh, wait, do I go or do I just call in? I don't know, but of being here in DC too, I think you're just close and could take advantage of these types of events. But I love what you said, Liz, about changing that narrative, and I think that's one thing that they did really well. Is there wasn't every single speaker just had something positive to say and reiterated points and topics about veterans that we all know, but I don't think it's always necessarily talked about in those larger forums. They want to focus on how do we help broken veterans, and I'm no, this was how do we employ and get veterans, because these guys are all
I was when the I'm gonna blank on his name. I'm not good with names, but when the general counsel of CVS Health spoke, oh my
Yes.
God, that was one of those stories, and it touched so many sectors. It touched, not just being a veteran, but also immigration. These things that are typically talked about in such a negative light, immigrating to the United States, serving in the military. I wanted to go like run through a wall for that guy. He has accomplished so much, and that was what was so beautiful about that. Like you're saying, Jen, every single speaker made me so proud to be a veteran and want to just scream it from the rooftops.
And I also what I like too is it also didn't feel like a overly rah
No, not at
where
all.
like we're pretending like there's not issues, right? Because like I feel like a lot of times it tends to be that. And Liz, I mean, I feel like you and I are really in this arena of like we got to talk about the crap. Like we have
Absolutely.
to talk about the crap and the negative. And Jen, I know you and I have talked about that a ton, but it didn't feel like that when the keynotes they had and the people they had, it didn't feel like it didn't feel like a pull yourself up from the bootstraps type thing. It was instead it was really motivating. It was very like inspirational. And I really did like that. And did you guys love the like fast rounds when they had the people, I think it was for like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the whole freaking structure. We could
Yeah.
structure the event for a whole hour. It was
Yeah.
so refreshing. Like you didn't have time to fall asleep because there was stuff that just kept happening.
And I will say too, so the night before the event there was a networking event, and I hate networking event. I think if anybody knows me, like they know that like I'm notorious for being
I saw
like
you, or I would not.
However, I was lost, right? Because I was lost in Georgetown. Were you guys lost? Yeah, I think we all were like lost in general.
Yeah, because if the Uber takes you to the wrong location, you have to like walk another 10 minutes to get to the building.
But there was somebody else lost, and they looked a little older, and they looked a little dressed up. So like we looked at each other, and we're like, "Are you going to this event?" And we're like, "Oh yes." And the atmosphere of he was like, "Okay, well then let's go together, let's figure it out," and just feeling so welcomed. And then we get in there, and I expect him to just walk away because I don't know him. Like, I mean, yeah, we just talked on the way up, but he just like kept walking around with me and introducing me to people, even though he just met me. I mean, that was the atmosphere of it, right? Like that was the atmosphere.
Is that a military thing, do you think, like the battle buddy concept, or is that just like a human nature thing?
I don't know, because I've been to other military networking events, and that was not it. That was not the way that I felt. Now, don't get me wrong, like I can put a face on in those situations where it's like, this is awkward and I don't like this. And obviously I get that I'm being off-putting, but it was just like, oh, just come along. And it didn't feel like I don't know. It was very, very welcoming. And multiple people came up to us during the networking event or stopped by. And again, I think that they had just done a really well job with like, we're here together to like, this is the mission to do this thing, instead of just like, oh, we're networking to like find the next opportunity or so that I can brag about myself.
Well, yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I think a lot of times in DC, when you go to these like veteran events, it's so many people from the same sector that it's like people feel, you can see them trying to climb over each other, scan the room for the next big person. Whereas I think it really helped that we were all from very different sectors and we were trying to learn from one another rather than use one another.
And that was the biggest, I was going to say, that was one of the biggest takeaways that I had, to engage and learn about other veteran, efforts across sectors that, you just don't typically hear about all the time. And it was so amazing to hear to have the collaborative conversations at the end too. And hear the different viewpoints from, private sector, from nonprofit, from VSO, from, senior military leadership to senior private sector leadership. Like it was just an amazing collaborative conference for sure.
And I don't know who is responsible for that, but they should pat themselves on the back. I mean, I have been in finance I've been in personal finance for 7 years now. And that was the first time ever that I was surrounded by finance professionals who were trying to better the military community. I was blown away. It was so refreshing.
About ready to like go ask for a job.
I know. Well, that goes back to everybody there was not just saying stuff. If you weren't there, at the end of the day, we had just had this phenomenal learning experience. And again, I'm terrible at names, but the gentleman at Wells Fargo stood up and he was like, this was so impactful. I am pledging that Wells Fargo will carry and cover financially 4 of these events next year across the entire country, which is like, that's money where your mouth is, which I don't think you see in today's society. It's beautiful to see in practice.
Well, and I love that he could just make that decision on the spot. And I think that's the difference between having the collaborative, private sector, nonprofit VSOs. I mean, how often do you, and I got to go back and get this voted on and blah, 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 blah. Whereas, when you have different people in the room, they could just stand up and make that executive decision. And then, wow, now we're already looking and the programming that we know we're going to see from Zero Mills. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, they crushed it. Put me in charge, Zero Mills. I want to be there. Tab, what are you thinking?
And I apologize. My internet is super, super spotty. I will say, like, I think one of like the feedbacks I had was, as great as it was, it could have been even better in regards to who was invited to come. And one for really challenging like my perceptions and experiences and things. And I think that, and we'll talk more in deep to the breakout rooms, but like, when it came to the breakout rooms, the thing I kept hearing during all day was that everybody kind of knew each other already. And I guess I was that person who didn't know anybody realistically. And we need, if we're going to, address things like this, then we need more of those people who don't fit that normal demographic or what we normally think, or those people who didn't have that great transition or easy transition. And we need a lot more of those junior ranks in, because that's the majority who is transitioning out. It's not the officers, it's not the high enlisted.
How do you do that, Tab? Like, that's such a good point. How do you invite someone who you don't know? Like, how do you make sure you get those invitations out to the people that need them? If I don't, so that's a huge problem, but it's a great point.
Yeah.
And it's things like what you, like, again, I was there literally because of my connection with you. I literally just asked, like, how do I go there in person? So it's when you have those champions, it's being cognizant of this. And again, it was a great event. This is not me saying it was not a great event.
Oh,
it's just
stellar
like,
event.
I'm always going to give, like, what can we do better, right? That's the point of an after action. Like, yeah. But it's where, I think having a plan of, okay, we need to invite at least, like, have a goal of having this many people who are not in this space and we know they're not.
Yeah.
Whether it's, looking through organizations like Minority Veterans of America, or, and I think back to the Marine Corps Educators Workshop. So every year, the Marine Corps, we would take educators to Parris Island for a week. You didn't get the educators who absolutely hated the military. Why? Because they wouldn't show up. But you did get the people who were like, I don't know. Or the people who were on the fence, but they had a friend who was more pro it, so that they can be in the space. Because if we're talking about recruiting, then we have to look at the things that, like, if you focus on what is retaining them and the issues of why people aren't being retained, and you focus on those type of things and talk about those type of things and try to solve that, that's what's going to get people to want to join, right? That's what's going to be that. So I think it's just, again, this was the first one, so I get it. But for the next, I think, especially now that you have this group of people who are invested in it, okay, now I need you guys to go find 5 people, or whatever the number is that are normally not in this space. Or I think it's also this concept of, like, what is a successful veteran, which I think in our group, we talked a lot more about it, because in our break-off group, we were small businesses. It doesn't mean that you're the CEO of a company and that means you're like some crazy successful thriving veteran. No, it could literally just be that, like, you started your own business and you're back in your hometown, right? And so being cognizant of that as well, you don't always want the same 10 people in the room doing the thing. You want some of those people who don't have the same views and stuff.
I think they kind of nailed it on the private sector side, because again, if I look at just the Wells Fargo participants, they had the junior employees and then they had the executives. So I think they nailed it on that side. But on the military side, to your point, I think it'd be really cool to have a military recruiting panel where it's 5 corporals who just re-enlisted. And it's the corporals who tell us, here's why I'm still in the Marine Corps, rather than like no, like I'm not throwing shade at the sergeant's major, but it would be really nice for a corporal to tell me, hey, here's why I'm still in the Marine Corps. They're probably going to say the same thing, but it's going to be a lot more impactful.
Well, and I think the same thing for, bringing a panel of, junior enlisted who just separated. Why did you leave? I think that would be very, in my work at Catholic University, I'm the program director for Veterans Upward Bound, and big piece of our demographic is that, one and done junior enlistee who's interested in going back to higher education. So, I mean, I hear all these stories. It would have been amazing to invite, 5 or 6 student veterans who had just let them see, what's out there for them, after they get out, after they graduate. I think these are the type of events that they, that would not only just encourage them to, continue on their educational path and progress that they're doing, but then eyes and their aperture to what is actually out there, and then to share that with the other airmen, or I'm going to use airmen, but other service members that they're still connected to. Because I mean, that's what we do. We all share stories, we all share resources, and I think that's the key to to just expanding that network.
I like that, and I think one thing Zero Mills did really well, and I'd argue they are doing better than any other for-profit or non-profit organization, they are finding thriving service members and they're amplifying their stories. I mean, it's like pulling teeth. You've got to like deep dive in Google to find stories of successful veterans, and they were thrown at you right and left. And I think they nailed it. And if you could bring in those, those PFCs, those sergeants, and show them this is what you're going to be after your successful career, that also is going to change the narrative. They're going to be more proud of their service. They're going to be more excited to separate and come back to the world as a productive member of society. Yeah, I think there's a huge benefit there to what you're both saying, to bringing in some of those junior service members and getting them involved in the conversation.
Yeah, because I think, I'm sorry, but I was going to say that's one thing that I think the services miss is, not highlighting successfully transitioning veterans, because I mean, only a fraction of us are going to stay in for 20 years. I mean, I myself retired, but obviously a minority. I think it would even just behoove the military to highlight, successful transitions, so people know before they're at that stage, like how to better set themselves up for when they do separate.
Oh yeah, and I'm not like, this is not me making this partisan, but I think it's a huge missed opportunity that veteran service organizations across America failed to recognize that both vice presidential candidates were veterans. I mean, holy freaking moly, that is
Awesome.
a powerful thing. You're not broken. You don't have to go back to your mom's house. Like, you can be these general counsels. You can be these senior level execs and throw out hundreds of grand for more like programs. You can have a wildly successful career after the military. And I think that's what we need to be focusing more on.
And it's too, and I know like Liz and I have talked about this so often, and it's not like hiding the reality of what service is. It's not hiding the struggles. It's not hiding those things. Everybody has struggles in life. Like, it's not just the military. It's not just the military. Like, women who don't serve in the military have a higher propensity to have PTSD than even the military population when you look at the statistics. Like, when we talk mental health and these things, that I think they've turned this narrative into something very, at least to me, as a storyteller, it's very strange that it's like sexual assault. I can't tell you how many people, when I say that I was in the military, they were like, oh, so you were sexually assaulted. Like, just because I'm a woman. And we're not saying that sexual assault isn't an issue in the military, right? Like, because we can talk about the issues, but that doesn't mean that was my experience just because I'm a woman in the military. It doesn't mean that just because somebody served in the military that they have PTSD, or that this experience. If you know one veteran, you know one veteran.
It's funny you brought that up. I always joke with people, but it's not really a joke. If there's a night out where I have too much to drink, I will always choose a room full of Marines that I've never met before in my life, rather than a room full of frat bros. I mean, yes, things go bad in the military. They go bad in the Marine Corps. But gosh, they have more services to help you on the back end than nearly any other organization in America. And I think that's the part of the story that's really, really lost. Also, I want to shout out Brenna, who said that was the best networking event ever. She left
Yeah.
out that it's the best networking event ever because of the food. There was so much food at this event. Like, it kept coming out. So much food. It was free.
Picture of your salad too.
It was so good.
So good. So good. Yeah, no, and I want to just, like you guys were saying, milk, if it was, more people would choose to do that. But I think on the opposite side, that's what also shows like the resilience of veterans. I mean, that's why we're so dedicated to service. That's why, we stand up for each other. That's why, you can tell a veteran when you meet one. And that's because, even if there are hardships, we've figured out how to make it to the other side. And many of us, take that, journey and then thrive because of it, not in spite of it.
And that's why you should be hiring us, because we are the type of people who will see the challenge and we'll get past it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to have.
And I think I loved the topic too. And maybe because this was on, because I was on the recruiting side of the house for so long. And I met so many adult, especially women, who didn't know the military was an option for them. And when they find it out later in life, they were like, I would have done that. Maybe not, 10 years, maybe just one enlistment. But I think that this, these younger generations, they have all of this information to their access. Well, they should be getting the proper knowledge to make that decision. The military is not for everybody, but you should be able to make that knowledgeable decision of, is this right for me? Could it be right for me? Could this career path lead me to whatever I want to do? And obviously, I think as a Marine, I'm going to say, it's different for us because most people join the Marine Corps for the straight intangibles. But that's the case, right? But I know so many veterans who have joined just for, I just wanted to go to college, and yet they end up staying, 10, 20, 15 years. And so I think it is a disservice that we're not having enough open conversations, or people feel like they can't speak about their service because of perception of what it means. And now we're having, people not being able to make informed decisions because they don't know any veterans, or they don't think they do, or they don't have somebody that they think they can go to have this honest conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I liked about the forum, because I felt like that was the topic, right? Like that was the underlying thing of how can we share our stories and talk about our stories in a raw, honest way, but so that people can make informed decisions. Not even so much so that we can recruit them into the military, but that people can know that it is a choice.
Well, and I think when you start having those conversations, I've been talking about this a little more lately, but I think there are a lot of veterans who are afraid to say they're a veteran. And if they were comfortable enough to say they're a veteran and they're a high performing veteran at their private sector place of employment, I think that would help these corporations realize, oh, you're a veteran? Is that why you've been so amazing? Like we're kind of hurting ourselves by not proudly talking about all the great things that we do.
But it's also fair because it is a privilege to be able to talk about that. Like when I was in Indiana, my LinkedIn and everything was separate to my work, because in Indiana, they can fire you for any reason. So I thought if I talked about my mental health or my physical disabilities, that would impact my job. And my husband's a stay-at-home dad. So the impact of if I lost my job and what that is. And so that's something I think in the veteran community, we do have to realize that, especially when so many, again, are junior and young enlisted, when they transition, they don't have the ability to wait for the job that they want or the career they want. It is literally like, I mean, we have service members who are on food stamps right now. Like there's a reality that we also have to, in the veterans space, be aware of that. But Liz, like we were saying, those of us who do have that privilege and are able to, we should be loud. I mean, when I moved to USDA, I got even louder about things. And then as I saw how my leadership at USDA was and how embracing they were, it was like, wow, I really can talk about these things. And my boss isn't thinking that like I'm incapable. My boss isn't like turning this into that. It was literally like, take care of yourself, do what you need to do. And it's just like, that's where those of us who can, we really do need to be able to, because there's those who can't.
You said food insecurity, which makes me kind of want to like pivot the conversation to one of the biggest parts of this event that we've not shouted out. It was free. It was a free event. Everybody who was there, it was free. And then there was free food. And I know that's so stupid that I keep like harping on this free food, but I didn't have to pay $600 to go to a forum to meet people I already knew. And I think that removing that barrier to entry was, I don't know if Zero Mills intended to remove it like that, but it was genius because it opened it up to a group of people who otherwise would not have been able to attend.
And it was one full day.
Yes.
It wasn't stretched out. You know, if you had to fly in, you could fly in for one night and then leave the next day. Or, you know, if you could just travel for the 1 day event. You know, I think just people's times, people's schedules, and people's pocketbooks was, you know, very valuable. And a conference like that opens it up to so many other participants who can share their stories, who, you know, might not have been able to otherwise.
Yeah, because I was able to take one personal day off of work. Because that's the other thing, right? Like somebody like me, like veteran space is not my job. I can't go to veteran events 9 times out of 10. I'm taking time off. And love USDA. That's not a bash to USDA, but that's not my job.
It's just the real world. It's just the real world.
That's real. Yeah, that's the real world. So, like you're saying, like it really, I think people following that structure, I think is really important. Like because people were able to come that I don't think would have been able to.
And I just want to say to like piggyback on what Jen said, for anyone who's listening to this, who's like, that seems like common sense. It's not. Like, I really want to emphasize that what Zero Mills did, it seems like common sense, but I just got back from an 8-day conference in Louisiana, which is, like Jen said, it doesn't just hurt my schedule, it hurts my pocketbook. And gosh almighty, am I going to advocate and rally and fight for an organization so much more if they respect my time, my family, my schedule, my money. And Zero Mills, like I don't know if that was an intentional thing that they went into planning, but gosh, they nailed it.
And I have to say this, since we're still on the food too, there was food options for everybody. Like I have a very strict diet and I was able to eat without them like asking. And they were so cognizant of that, which is wild. And I don't expect people to like accommodate me because I have extreme like diet restrictions, but like their food options was like, it felt like somebody thought about it. It really did. And again,
it was inclusive, Tab.
Yeah, it was inclusive. Like actually inclusive
of like it was racially inclusive. It was sector inclusive. It was branch inclusive. It was food inclusive. And I don't think I have ever been to an event where I was like, oh, holy moly. Like this is.
I don't remember what panel it was, but I remember I leaned over to Tab and I was like, I have never seen that much diversity on a stage at a veteran panel.
It was so good. And I don't want people to think that we're like going into these events looking for diversity. But when you think about the food thing or the free part, like the free entry, it's those little things that you never see it. When you do see it, you're like, oh, that's great.
And it was so cool to hear the different perspectives. I think that's what it brought. It brought so many different viewpoints and perspectives that I don't typically hear on a large platform, you know, across the board. And it was just definitely a very inviting conference.
Which I think is the perfect segue to, so the morning was like these keynote speakers, people talking, and then we went to work. The afternoon was legit, like we broke off into groups and we had a mission, and that was the focus. And I thought that was freaking phenomenal, like so awesome. But Liz, since you were a part of like facilitating that, can you talk a little more about that part of it?
So full disclosure, I was a little nervous going into that because like Tab said, it was a break-off session where, again, they strategically picked people from private sector, public sector, high level, low level, active duty, spouses. Everyone was chosen strategically to go into their subgroups. And then we were supposed to create an event. That's basically what we were told to do. Create an event where we can change the narrative on a global scale. But we want to do it at the community level. So what would our messaging look like? Who would we invite? What events would we have there? What challenges would we have? And going into it, I've been to a lot of these. We've all been to like group projects where 75% of the people don't talk. So I was very concerned going in. And they had this great idea. Again, it sounds silly, it sounds simple, but they had the little postcard idea where you all started writing your ideas down. Every single person in our room spoke. It was amazing to see just the engagement and the inclusivity and the ideas. And because every single person spoke, we came up with a really freaking great idea for the future.
That's
And-
awesome.
And just to paint a picture for those who weren't there, so there were 4 rooms total, correct?
Yeah.
There was, Jen, what was your room?
Don't remember what the exact like topic was, but we were tasked with taking 3 difficult situations. So one was a PCS, one was food, and then one was oh gosh, what was it? It was broken up into 4 quadrants, and it was, how can the government, how can the private sector, how can veteran service organizations, and then how can nonprofits help support these times of either military transit. That was a military transition. Yeah, it was totally different. Yeah, so military transition, military PCS, and food security. And so everybody in the room. Oh, thank you. Yeah, but it really amazing to see all of the ideas come through because we had private sector, we had VSOs, we had government representatives, and we had nonprofits, and everybody was like, okay, this is how we can help. This is how we could fill this gap. And, and then we had all of our little Post-its again on our that were collected at the end and, kind of told the story of how the 4 different quadrants could support as a collective, holistic way, military families, active duty and transitioning.
See, and I love that. And I love how like they put it on the back of it was like what room we didn't know what we were going into beforehand. It was like the number. And I like that because when we were talking about like the diversity of thought, that way it wasn't just the people who like feel like they're in that space, right? Or already in that space. It really like, again, I love that like challenging of perceptions or just different views. So I loved how that was done. And then I guess the other room was healthy communities.
Yeah, mine was, healthy communities was the one, helping to build healthy communities.
Yeah. And then I didn't know your guys' room was so cool. Like, dang,
I
wish I was in that one too.
Yeah, because I'm about to be like, why wasn't I in Finding Purpose? Now I want to go to that one. I had no idea the rooms were so different.
I didn't either. Like until you just talked about yours, I thought we were all in there posting our, it sounds like everybody got the Post-it notes, which was a great idea, by the way.
Post-it notes were genius. And the candy.
Yeah.
And we go back to the food. Like, there was food in every single briquette. It was phenomenal. Great job, guys. Really good.
You can go, Liz. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we were in the small business and storytellers. Liz and I were in the same room, which obviously I was like really excited about that one. But I think it was really cool. And there were a lot of Marines in our room. So obviously like we're going back and forth, like, and talking. And there was, I won't say an incident. It wasn't an incident, but like where a Marine, saying something. And I was just like, whoa. Like, that's wild. We're going back and forth like Marines talk. And I saw everybody else cringe and we're just looking at each other like, what? Right. And so the ability to, again, not have the same school of thought and to have conversation with the goal not being I'm right. The goal is like, well, hold on. Listen to this perspective. Yeah. And okay, we'll put that up there. I like that dynamic was really awesome.
And it got heated for a moment. I don't know about your room, Jen, but Paul, if he's listening, he can second this. But heated in a good way. I mean, they started getting in a little tiff about food insecurity. And it was a good argument, which I don't think, again, changing the narrative, but you're not even changing the narrative about military or service. You're changing the narrative about what it means to be a good citizen at that point. You're showing people you can argue and make America better. And I think you were able to have those healthy arguments because of how cognizant they were of the size of the group and the people in the room. You would not have had that conversation anywhere else, or people would have literally started fighting.
Yeah, what I loved about, oh, go ahead.
Nope. Sorry.
No, I was
we're
going to say what I
excited.
loved.
We're just like, woo!
I know what I loved about our room, same thing. You know, you had very strong opinions about why things were broke, like why, you know, PCSs are difficult or whatever. And, you know, you had the different perspectives of why that was. And, you know, agree or disagree, hear people's suggestions about how to make it better based on their background, based on their perspective, and based on their view of that topic, being either completely removed from the private sector and not, you know, not veterans themselves, or the veteran community understanding and sharing why it's difficult, why private sector needs to understand, hey, this move, it's a whole family. It's not just the military serviceman member. And it was, yeah, it was such a productive conversation.
You know, I don't know what you said that made me think about this, but, and sorry, I think I just have like a squirrel brain. So I want to say this. Zero Mills is for profit.
Yes.
And if you ask them about that, it was a very strategic decision to be for profit, because they wanted to make sure that when they were speaking to nonprofits, the nonprofits didn't feel threatened. And they wanted to make sure that when they went to other for-profits, CVS, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, they were able to really have a seat at the table. And I wonder if part of the reason the conversations were so productive is because they came at it from a for-profit corporate like way.
I think so, because I didn't realize that until they said it, and I was just like, that makes so much sense. Like, that makes so much sense. And Kevin, I'm putting his comment up. So okay,
Yeah.
so here's all the 4 breakout rooms.
Oh, so this is what we all, so we all did have a common thing: outcomes, barriers, messaging, and tactics.
Which, again, for people who are listening, we're not the experts. We didn't run the event. We just participated in the event.
This is a lunchtime gossip session. This is all
Yes,
we're doing.
it is. Yes, it is. It's just bring your lunch, and we're sharing like our experience. We're not the subject matter experts on it, but again, it was just such
This message not sponsored by Zero Mills.
Yeah.
No.
If you guys do owe me a T-shirt, Kevin. So that would be nice.
Oh, I do want a T-shirt.
You know, going back to what Tab said, just to let people know the reality of the DC nonprofit sphere, especially in the veteran arena, it is a competition. No one is ever going to say that out loud because then it makes them look bad. But at the end of the day, most veteran nonprofits are fighting one another for physical assets, building space, for monetary assets, money, for membership, for radio time, for all this stuff, for your attention. To have them come in as a for-profit allowed them to bring in the VFW and Minority Vets and the American Legion and MOA. Also, shout out to all of them for being in the same room. Was very impressed. Yeah, they nailed it. And I think they were able to have that inclusive, warm, welcoming environment because they were for-profit.
I think people hear for profit and it's got a very negative moniker, but I'm putting my MBA hat on right now. I have learned so much about the different constructs and like, you know, value-based business. And honestly, I would love to see more veteran for-profit organizations stand up, because I think you can just, again, you can really navigate the space without being in competition necessarily with people. It seems like it levels the playing field a little bit more.
Glad our T-shirts are coming. We're officially sponsored. Now that we're sponsored, we can say all the bad things.
I was about to say, we are sponsored now.
Yeah, I think they nailed it. I'm trying to think of other things to bring up.
And
I will say they did need a I don't know what we would call them, but they need a ringleader in the back to shush people.
Oh my gosh! So I was gonna say the
loud talkers.
Maybe put the food in another room. So like when you like walk to the back, you still get your food. There's no stress. You can go back there. But that way, if you guys are chatting, you're not like chatting in our ears.
Yeah. There were some loud, careless whisperers.
And
I
I will
think
say
that's veterans. We're all
Yeah,
loud.
that
That's
is.
true.
And for anybody listening who has questions, comment, feedback, let us know because we'll put it up and we'll discuss it. We have about like 15, 20-ish minutes left from this conversation. But I want to make sure if you guys have questions, feedback, because I know there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, weren't able to attend and really wanted to hear about it. So feel free to shoot those. And I agree on that.
I'm trying to think of all the random things where I like made a mental note. So again, my mind is kind of like a squirrel, but I have never met someone from Jewish War Veterans of America until this event. And it was the coolest thing ever because going back to the veteran nonprofits, there's like 45,000 of them. And so the fact that they were able to pull in so many of them into one room and then they were all working together, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what it's supposed to be. Like, this is what it's supposed to look like. They nailed it. It was really cool to see all of the nonprofits come together.
I would like to see more of the non-DoD side of the house, special federal. There's so many, almost every agency and department has their own veteran employee resource group. And as far
You
as
mean
I
like
know,
you want to see more USDA, DOS, stuff like
yeah,
that?
because I was the only, at least as far as I know, the only ERG from a non-DoD entity
But
from
it
USDA.
makes-
And I took my personal time to go. I didn't get like time off of work. I took personal time. Because again, like this is the stuff that I think is important because when we look at how many veterans are hired federally and the safety net of being hired as a federal employee, your civil rights are protected, right? So if you're somebody who has disabilities, mental or physical, you're protected in a way that you're not in other places. That's the reality. Again, somebody who's from Indiana where you can be fired at any reason. And there are so many veterans who don't even acknowledge that they're veterans for a multitude of reasons. Part of it, the perception of what it means to be a veteran. And I've heard that a lot more since I came over federal side of how like it's seen as a negative being a veteran. And it's not a positive perception. And so they don't talk about it. And then they never talk about it. And just having the conversation, the amount of people who, don't get the healthcare that they need from the VA or don't do these things or they don't feel like they're a veteran. Having spaces like this or, being able to learn more ERGs, how can we do more to create this conversation and this storytelling just makes people more comfortable to come in and start getting those resources. So that's something in the future would love to see, whether it's through the Interagency Veterans Council, so on and so forth. And I didn't meet everybody in the room. So again, like not saying I knew everybody there because I didn't know like anybody there. But definitely is something I think that would be helpful for future events because there are going to be future events.
I did forget. Yeah, DOL was there. One of their directors, Vets, DOL Vets was there.
I take that back. Yes, I so I take that back. But and I'm talking, some of these like smaller agencies or just different agencies, or again, even more opportunities of. I would love to have the people who are not normally in the places, and that's something we're working really hard in USDA, where it's not always like the same people who are representing or speaking, and not the brass, not the like guy who got out as a sergeant major or the woman who got out as an officer, but those people who think that their stories, oh, I only did 4 and I didn't deploy. Okay, your story still matters just as much, right? Like,
the one thing we haven't said this yet, but listening to what you're saying, for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt like they weren't virtue signaling. It was a truly the private sector who were there, when they were up there saying, we want military, they weren't up there saying, we want military because it's November and it'll really help our bottom line and we can hire you guys for cheaper and it's so great and then we get tax discounts. Like, it's exhausting to be in the real world, for lack of better words, and realize, oh my God, my service is literally just a punchline of a joke. And I'm now quoting that movie. But to see these people facilitated by Zero Mills genuinely appreciate the military, and not for their service, but because of those unspoken attributes they have, it allowed everyone else in the room to come out and say, I'm proud to be Marine. I'm proud to be an airman. And I think if TAB got her way and could have some more of those other groups there, they might leave and say, oh, we've been looking at this the wrong way. yeah, the tax cuts are great, but we should hire these Marines and these airmen because they're resilient and they're always going to come to the fight with a happy heart. That was really refreshing. And if I could hit anything a million times, it would be that it wasn't virtue signaling. It was truly, truly welcoming.
No dog and
Definitely
pony show.
authentic.
Yeah, and I love I feel like the problem solving and how good veterans are at problem solving came across a lot, and I think that's something that, again, private sector and I think other entities don't realize that, like, you know, I'm not in the hiring process at all, but I can't say how many times those veterans who are there just like, I know that a veteran can do this, like this job, they know how to problem solve, they know how to do this, they know how to do these things that are not easily trainable, as where this entity is. And I think that it was just so well done in that aspect too, where I felt like, maybe because that was the whole theme of like problem solving and doing it, that was like the same thing with like the veterans in the space and how, you know, they viewed it, and not a, like you said, not a dog and pony show, not a, like,
We didn't all get with like a hashtag veterans are great, like poster behind us. It was phenomenally executed.
Yeah. Well, what I liked about it too is like when they built the groups the way they really highlighted the fact that veterans are problem solvers, like you mentioned, because you know all the training in the world can't prepare you to think outside the box until you're just thrown into a project and said, hey, figure it out. And I don't think you see that a lot on the private sector because you're dealing with profit and loss. You're dealing with,
amen. The
people's
monetization,
money.
yeah.
Exactly. But what people don't understand is veterans, we're thrown in charge of projects that in the private sector we in charge of, but we figure it out. And that's how we learn. And that's why we're so much better at just thinking outside the box, because we've had to be successful. And then, a lot of private sector companies should realize is like these veterans, like we've already been tested and we've already succeeded. And that's why we know how to figure things out, because we've been allowed to fail and we've been given a lot of leash to do so.
Jen, did you see the story? It was a Marine. I think he was out at Okinawa. They didn't have a part for some piece of equipment and it was going to be on back order for like 18 months. The guy went home overnight and he 3D printed it.
Yeah.
That would never happen in corporate America because your job ends at 5 p.m. And that I want to hire that Marine because like you're saying, no matter what problem I throw at him, he's going to take it home and work on it. That is what makes the military so much better.
And I got it listed. The one thing that they know how to respond to is no, and then come and ask again. And ask it a different way, and ask it a different way, because they're like, all right, we never get yes the first time.
Yeah, we're going to be persistent. We're going to get this job done.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that stood out to me too, and I think it's like when our room got a little heated, it was because like somebody had commented like, oh, the recruiter, something about asking the recruiters to do more. And I was like, the whole point of this is that we're not asking the active duty to do any more. They don't have the capacity.
Yeah, can we not have the recruiters with the highest suicide rate and the highest divorce rate do any more? We need them to do less.
But I love this because that's what, like, to me, this forum was about, was that we're not like, because I feel like I've been a part of other conversations or other places where it all just comes back to, well, the base didn't give us access or the active duty didn't do this. And this whole thing was about like, great, we support you, but we're going to do this to support you, not ask you to like, here, you do this. Like, it was, no, this is literally what we're going to do. And I think that is the mindset when we're ever talking about like actual change. It's like, you have to be the one to do it, not give other people the, like, you do this.
Look, Kevin,
it was solution development together. It was like everybody coming up with not somebody just handing you something, because you're never going to learn if you just handed something over and over again. And I think that collaborative solutions is the way to go forward.
And this is probably the coolest thing, is the event didn't just like end and then nothing comes of it. Like, as Kevin and I posted the comment, like there's all the stuff that is going to come from it. And that's where we're at now.
Do you think these events should continue to happen in DC, or do you think they should happen in like Washington State, Florida State? What do you think should happen next?
Rural. I think we're missing a huge, and I'll say this because I come from Indiana. There are not a ton of resources. There's not installations. There are not bases. And when you look at majority of where people are being recruited out of, those type of things, this needs to, and I said it again, take this to Purdue University. If you need help getting a connection at Purdue, let me know, because I think Purdue University, Midwest, that type of rural America is where you need it. But then you also do need it in the cities, right? You need to look at, again, as diverse as this was in DC, doing that across the nation and looking at that diversity, because there are different challenges, there's different conversations, and there's different ways to approach it. I like the DC because, again, I feel like so many from DC are not actually from DC, although they live there now. So it's a great starting point, and it is a good place, but it definitely should not be the only place. And I will again say that this is something that I know Purdue University, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, but I've seen the things they do with the Military Family Research Institute that, like, I can see this working very well at a university like Purdue, like it was at Georgetown.
Do you think, like, so we see recruiting is really suffering in the Rust Belt in particular, that Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin area. Do you think if you moved these two areas that were really struggling, like the Rust Belt, you'd see a change in recruiting?
I do, but again, it's going to be the long game. Like, that's what we're talking about. I think oftentimes that's, I think we were having that conversation in our room about, like, we're not talking to the high schoolers. We need to be talking to the elementary school. And I have to shout out the idea in our group from a small business side was a small business sponsoring a scholarship where students would write an essay on a local veteran, and then it would get combined into a book, and then that book would go to, like, the local, schools or local library. That's the type of initiatives. And when we talk recruiting and these type of things, there's so many multiple touch points that have to happen. And so, yes, but it's a longer game. Something like this is a longer game. It's not going to be a super fast solution, but it's a more stable solution. Right?
And
We're changing the narrative.
Yeah, and education. Obviously it's my role right now, but it's something that, it's life. I was, a first generation college student, low income before I joined the military. And so now I get to work with those type of students every day. And I think, like Tab said, that's the long game, is like teaching people the military is just one step. And then you can completely change the trajectory of your life through, access to things like the GI Bill, access to things like tuition assistance while you're still serving. These are things that, people dream of or have to write and, try to get scholarships for that, as an active duty service member or guard or reserve, to this. And it's just something that I think most people feels like trying to, figure out what they want to do next should really take stock of. It's just a valuable asset that, really has the ability to just change the whole path of your life.
And again, we're not spokesperson, so that's why I keep tagging, putting Kevin's comments up, because we don't know all the
spokesperson. Paul is the spokesperson. Well, ladies, as we get towards the end, I guess I just want to say thank you for being two great examples of military thriving. As cheesy as it sounds, like, you guys didn't need to hop on this call. Tab definitely didn't need to organize this for us, and yet she did it. And I think that's an example of someone just taking it to the next step and really helping the community.
Well, obviously, I had a great day with you guys at the event and then today. But again, it's things like these where I think, too, there's something about the veteran space and the safety of it, and the it's a hard time of year for me. This is always like a struggle this time of year, but being able to be in a space where you know that you are safe. I don't care how corny that sounds. Like, when you can go in a space and feel safe and be yourself. And that's something that I think that, like, as veterans, like, we just do really well. I don't know. I love the veteran community. And I think we can do better at the same time. Right. And, like, that's the whole, that's the thing I feel like I always talk about, is, like, if you really love something, then you always expect it to be better, which is why I was like, let's have this talk it out session instead of me trying to type one post that did not fulfill think the conversation that the three of us were able to have.
I think if they can just ensure moving forward that people are safe to be themselves, they're going to crush it, which they did the first time. But if they can carry that through, no matter how big they get, they're going to do phenomenal.
I agree.
Yeah. I love that, it was a safe space to disagree, but then move forward and then just come up with, even better solutions.
Agree. I don't have anything else. I think we're getting
Yeah, girlies,
some
I
comments
have
that
a
have
1
gotten up.
o'clock, so I
Yep,
have to
so
go.
we'll pop off. All right. Well, thank you all for coming to this, talking, and it'll stay up for as long as you want. But I will end this now. But let us know if you guys have any feedback. And thanks.
Love you too. Thanks for doing this, Tab. Good to see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.